This is Linux In-Laws, a podcast on free Libre open source software, broadcasting from the United Kingdom and Germany.
Welcome to Linux In-Laws, Season 2, Episode 57, the big one. Martin, how are things? On this 57, Episode 2.
57.
57,
that's,
yes.
That's a good number. Yeah, I like it.
Is it a prime, I wonder?
Yeah.
As in the episode number.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
It's not.
Can be divided by 3.
With that, we'd like to introduce
57.
our guests. Okay. Yes, our guest is right, because
19, yeah, okay.
It is, yes.
There you go,
And
just in case you
So
had it.
let's skip
One
the politics. Let's skip the politics
Yes,
and
indeed.
let's get right to it.
Good.
With that, we would like to introduce our guests. Otto, why don't you go first?
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm Otto Richter from near Berlin in Germany, and I'm one of the executive board members of Codeberg. And yeah, I'm saying one of because we recently got more than me, and I'm happy to talk about that today.
But we do have another guest. Michael, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Michael Jerger, and I'm from southern Germany. And I'm just a contributor to 4JO. And I think we will talk today also about the relationship between 4JO and Codeberg. So that's the reason for being here. Great, and thanks for the invitation.
Pleasure. Full disclosure, we did a previous episode on Master GmbH, of which Michael, I reckon, is probably fair to say who's the CEO of that company. So in the interest of keeping it short, people, why don't you listen to the previous episode so we can kind of aim for a record with regards to just listen to the previous episode, and that's for at least 4JO. And now Otto has 2 sentences on Codeberg, and then we are done within the next 5 minutes. That would be a record of the shortest Linux In-Laws show ever. No, I'm joking. For the 2 people in the audience who do not know what 4JO is, never mind Codeberg, why don't you take it away, Michael or Otto, and kind of introduce the whole thing in terms of what Codeberg is, what 4JO is, how did you arrive at that, and all the rest of it. And within 4 hours, we should probably have this covered.
Yeah, actually, you can build a very heavy timeline on that. I actually tried to build a funny timeline using Git only. I will, sure, there will be a link to that in the meeting notes. We'll send it later. Yeah, Codeberg is basically your non-profit alternative to Microsoft GitHub for all your open source software projects. So whenever you have an open source project that you don't want to host on Microsoft servers, for whatever reason, whether you believe that Microsoft shouldn't have monopoly over open source, or whether you would like to have only free software, Codeberg is your place to be. And for that, we use open source software ourselves. And in 2022, we forked 4JO from the existing Gitlab project in order to have more control and be independent from a Chinese company that was created to back the development. So now Codeberg and 4JO are kind of like working close together to allow everyone to be independent from GitHub, whether it's on Codeberg or your self-hosted 4JO instance.
And before we kind of touch upon the finer details, we should probably explain what GitHub, Gitlab, and in general kind of code version systems are with regards to, for the 2 people in the audience who have been living under a rock.
Yeah,
We're
going for the 6-hour episode.
Exactly. So I reckon everybody is somewhat familiar with GitHub, but why 4JO? And how did 4JO come into existence, and why is it important? Because everybody is hosting GitHub anyway, no?
I mean, everyone is of course a term that can never be true, because there's always someone who has not yet even moved to GitHub, for instance. There are a lot of people who are still on SourceForge or their cgit or whatever. And Actually, there are projects moving to GitHub every day, but there are also tons of projects moving out of GitHub every day. And some people think they are not visible, but actually there's like a really large community outside of GitHub, people that refuse to use GitHub in the first place. And yeah, part of that community is actually around Codeberg.
Before we go into the Codeberg details, why don't we shed some more light on the history of 4Jo and how it arrived at that alternative solution? And for the people who are interested in the details, let's keep this short. I need to say there is the previous episode on my site and 4Jo, and details, of course, will be in the show notes. But just a kind of a short summary of why essentially you, all of those months ago, you were looking for an alternative to the likes of Gitlab, GitHub, and all the rest of them. Just kind of crossing the T's, dotting the I's with regards to how did you arrive at forking a code base outside GitHub, outside Gitlab, and all the rest of them?
I mean, I think it makes sense to do a full look at the history of the code, at least. Actually, in the very early days, there was Gox, which was probably named after like Go Git service. It was a very simple tool to self-host your own Git. And I mean, self-hosting Git is, of course, something that is relevant to many. I mean, if you just have your side project or you work within a company, you don't always want to use GitHub. Also keep in mind that some years ago, GitHub did not offer free private repositories. So whenever you had code that you didn't want to be public without paying for it, self-hosting Git service was the way to go. And some years later, when Gox had a small community, some maintainers were unhappy about the direction the project was taking. And I mean, this is probably a common thing in open source software that you get unhappy with the project leads, or maybe the single project lead in the worst case. And so Gitty was created. And in 2018, and the years earlier before that, some members thought, okay, why should we not create a hosted service out of it, so that people don't have to set up their Raspberry at home or their own server? Let's create one big instance of Gitty where everyone can go to. They also considered using Gitlab, which has some community edition, which is free to use, but the free license excludes some features. So they decided to use Gitty for the community aspects. And I also got involved with Codeberg and as such with Gitty over time. And there was again some unhappiness about the leadership of the project. And the final trigger was when the people that owned the domains of Gitty announced that they created a for-profit company. And every maintainer that I know was completely caught by surprise with that. And if you visit the Gitty homepage now, it advertises enterprise features of like a single company. It advertises some cloud offering. And I think this is something that free software projects do not deserve. I mean, it's fine to create a business out of it, but in my opinion, it shouldn't be the main homepage advertising for it, or advertising for like a monopoly. And a lot of people agreed, and so we forked 4Jo. And initially, it was like a soft fork, which means that we took the Gitty source code and modified it, but we based it on top of the Gitty modifications regularly. And finally, we decided that we want to move in a direction that differs from Gitty. And so we now have a hard fork. So both projects have now an independent history moving forward.
The hard fork was in 2022, if I recall correctly, right?
Yes, we're approaching the 3 years, actually.
And what was the details of the hard fork that you needed? As in, what did you want to change to decide on the hard fork?
I mean, there are many things. One thing is that we felt that 4Jo was very difficult to maintain because we have a lot of features and we had a lot of refactorings going on at Gitty. But for once, we disagreed about certain code architecture decisions that were made in these refactorings. And the second thing is that we dealt with a lot of regressions because the test coverage wasn't very good. And at ForJayo, we introduced a testing requirement, which means that code that goes into ForJayo has a significant amount of testing, which doesn't always mean that it is fully covered by automated tests. Sometimes we acknowledge that it can be difficult, but we all agree that the direction should be to get better at test coverage and have less bugs. And finally, we felt like this was only possible with no longer basing on top of the latest Git code. And even if that means that we lose some features that Git has implemented, it also means that we have more control over what is shipped to our users, and that we can make sure it passes our quality control, which doesn't only mean automated testing, but also user research. Because, I mean, what use is to have like an additional button if it's only useful to a few people and annoying for the majority of users and such. So we wanted to have more control over what we actually ship to our users and what we are responsible for in the end.
Okay. Yeah. So it sounds like you've also got some non-automated testing in that case. And sorry, second question. Does that mean that the extra tests that you introduced don't pass in the Git project?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably also a reasonable strategy to say, okay, we move fast and break things. A lot of companies and projects use this strategy, but when you approach a certain size, I feel like it's important to set some quality standards. And being tested doesn't necessarily mean automated testing, as you already asked for. Sometimes it also means, okay, you have demonstrated your change only, so you verified it and you did some kind of reproducible steps for testing. So especially like third-party integrations, for example, someone who creates a webhook to, say, some proprietary chat system like Slack or Discord. It's very hard to test in an automated manner, but then you have like verifiable steps that anyone can take to verify that something still works. And we are also playing with a lot of additional testing. For example, I've been working on a lot of browser tests, which means that ForJayo is actually tested in a real browser using a framework developed by Microsoft, which is called Playwright. And you actually write a script that records some actions like click on a button and then expect that you're redirected to another page or that something showed up. And we've gained a lot of traction with that. So a lot of new UI changes are actually verified with browser testing. And I mean, the foundation we inherited from Git has a single, I think it still is a single demonstration browser test. And ForJayo really significantly expanded the test suite with visual testing now. So we even do screenshots and check for pixel perfect stuff. Yeah, I think that's a huge difference. And it's kind of only possible if you're under the full control, so you don't get surprised by changes that you didn't expect.
So if I get this right, ForJayo is the underlying technology as in stack, and Codeberg is the offering on top with regards to a hosted service.
Yeah, I mean, for the history of ForJayo, I think it's important to note that Codeberg existed before ForJayo, because Codeberg was initially based on top of Git.
Okay.
And a lot of the Git maintainers, or like some people that contributed to Codeberg, have also been active in the Git project and contributed there. And yeah, we basically the goal of Codeberg is to create an offering for free and open source software projects. So everyone who is contributing to free software, if you do that, you can even have some private repositories, for instance. I mean, for your personal node or your side project you don't want to publish, or if you have a project that is not yet ready for release, you can do that on Codeberg. But we are explicitly not a drop-in replacement for GitHub. I mean, if you do not write any free software code, but only proprietary software, Codeberg is not your place, but you can still self-host ForJayo or use another public ForJayo instance if you want to.
Now, it's interesting because if I take a look at the innovations that ForJayo introduced, I mean, of course, links within the show notes, but I watched a couple of presentations over the course of 2025, and one of the big differences apparently is actually that ForJayo allows federated source code control, if I'm not completely mistaken, which is unlike Git, which is a step towards world domination in terms of you have a couple of repositories that are actually able to talk to each other, which I think is a major innovation.
I mean, Michael, I think this one is for you.
Yes, that's the point. I'm working mainly on this federation topic, and I'm at the moment we proposed, or let me start other way around. The last time we talked about this upcoming feature, the federated user activities, and this feature is unfortunately stuck at the moment, but we are preparing for funding, and funding will allow us in terms of federation to federate pull requests and to federate also search and issues. And I think these two features can explain what federation is about. So Git federation, we have all. So you have remote URLs in your Git repository and can push and pull from and to this remote, and you can have many of them. And that's the first part of federation of the code. But all the around features you need on your Git platform, so like issues like projects, milestones, discussions, reviews, approvals, these parts are not federated, and that's I think the major selling point, the unique selling position of ForJayo.
But I reckon you have to start somewhere because, I mean, okay, fair enough, federated issues and all the rest of them are probably on your roadmap, but I think the fact alone that you are thinking along these lines, because that introduces scalability beyond enterprise-like offerings like GitHub and so forth on a purely open source basis. I mean, that's a major breakthrough, no? Yeah. At least I perceive it that way anyway.
Indeed, yes. So you can scale, or let me say, GitHub can scale by buying and provisioning additional servers, but it's just one URL, and if this DNS entry is gone, GitHub would not be reachable. But ForJayo instances federated has no single point of failure.
It's almost like Mastodon versus X, right? Oh, sorry, whatever.
Yes.
Twitter, what it was called previously.
Yes.
Sorry. Yes, I mean, exactly. Because you're introducing resilience, you're introducing all the rest of it. And needless to say, global scalability. And that's amazing.
Yes, we will rule the universe.
So world domination is just a step. It's just a step away.
Just a small step, yes.
And people you heard it here first. Exactly. Changing tack just a little bit. And this is probably more like the Codeberg route down. If I take a look at the website, I noticed that actually it's a registered association in Berlin, as in Berlin, Germany. Why did you decide to register that in the European Union, and what are the implications? And who is behind this Codeberg entity?
I am not among the founding members. I was looking at the project from the early days, even before it officially launched, but I was not among the founding members. And I kind of assume that the primary motivation to register it here in Berlin was that the folks that did this have been located in Berlin. And I mean, if you start a project and want to register some entity, it's, I think, pretty common to just stick to what you know, what's around you. But there's a very specific reason why people were kind of pissed off by GitHub. And the reason is that GitHub has to abide by American law. And I feel like for many people here in Europe, it's really strange how certain things work. And I think one of the common things is how DMCA, so copyright complaints work. And there was a project called Gadget Bridge, which was like the toy project of one of the founding members. And it received a DMCA complaint because some proprietary app said, hey, they are stealing our source code, which was entirely false, basically. Gadget Bridge is an app where you can connect your smart gadgets. So, for example, your smartwatch and many other devices for a smart home and whatever. All the smart things you can just connect into one app independent of your vendor. It doesn't send data to the Chinese cloud. It is all stored locally on your smartphone. But some company basically did the same thing and said, oh, they're copying our code, which they did not, but I mean, hard to prove. And the normal reaction to such a DMCA complaint is that the repository is taken down, and then the repository owner has to get a lawyer. It's not possible, as far as I know, to do this without hiring a lawyer. And you need to file a counter complaint, and which is completely different from the law here in Europe, where you just, I mean, if you want to take down a project for copyright complaint, that's also possible, but you need to prove that they're actually violating some copyright before the project magically disappears. And I mean, for someone from Europe, it's pretty strange to abide by American laws that work very different from what you know. And if you have to settle something in court, you would even have to do that in the United States. And I think that even nowadays, a lot less people are motivated to travel to the US for a legal case like this. And yeah, for me personally, it felt also very weird to have everything stored on American platforms. Not because I don't like American projects in general, but America in many cases also stands for like the mega corporations. I mean, I don't mind small American startups, but I like nonprofits. There are also American nonprofits that have become very large, but it always feels weird to feed the largest corporations of the world, such as Microsoft.
Given the recent developments, and I'm talking about the last 3 years, who really wants to go to America? I really see your point there. It's very interesting because at the end of the day, I'm not too sure about the big picture here, but maybe my prayers, of course, will go out to that. And yes, we are explicit. So if you want to skip the next 2 minutes of political rant, just go ahead and press forward on your podcast player. No, jokes aside. The thing is that for the time being, with the current administration in place on something called the Hill, or also known as the White House, things seem to be drifting apart. But I reckon at the end of the day, and this is just my philosophical perspective, this planet only has a chance of surviving if we pull it together in terms of if we cooperate rather than separate. So I reckon this current administration, Blondie, Goldilocks, whatever you want to call him, is just a temporary nuisance, let's put it this way. And at the end of the day, as in with the next administration, things will be really different. It's just a matter of how much damage can be done within 4 years, as in the current legislation, in terms of the current ruling of the president of the US, has time for to implement his measures. But I reckon that hopefully the midterms will make a change, and eventually Mr. Trump will be ousted, for want of a better expression, so that things will be back to normal again, and both sides of the pond will grow back together again as they used to for the time since the Second World War, as in the late 40s, the early 50s of the last century. Anyway, without getting too philosophical, let's change tack just a little bit. If it's a registered entity or association rather in Germany, the question, of course, begs where you get the money from. How is Codeberg funded? Let's put it this way.
Yeah, actually, Codeberg is one of the few nonprofits that have grown very organically. I mean, we know a lot of examples where there was like one billionaire who wanted to do something good and then poured some money into it, or some venture capital funding, and Codeberg did none of that. So the accounting of the first years looks pretty funny, because you see double-digit numbers like, spendings of 11 euros for buying the domain and some virtual server, and income of like 40 euros from the first membership fees. And yeah, indeed, we are completely funded by membership fees and donations. So everyone who wants to support the project can do a one-time or a recurring donation, but we also offer something very special. You can become a legal member and even receive voting rights. And I mean, nonprofits that allow legal members and provide them with voting rights is not that uncommon. I mean, there are quite some nonprofits, but I think Codeberg is exceptional in the sense that we have a lot of individuals with control, and legal entities don't receive any voting rights. And this basically means that Codeberg is under control of now more than 1,000 individuals, which financially back the association, and many of them, I guess about 700, have voting rights. So they are invited into one annual assembly once a year, and we sometimes also send out circular votes for like important matters during the year. And they can basically decide on the direction of the nonprofit, sometimes via direct votes, and by electing important gremiums like the Presidium, which is like the steering committee of the association, as well as the cash auditors, for example, who control that everything follows correct usage and no funds are being used for malicious purpose. Yeah, and I think that, I mean, there's some smaller collective than that, but I think this makes us really different from many other nonprofits. I mean, you can't simply join the Signal Foundation and cast your vote. That's not possible, but you can join Codeberg and have your say for the next, for the direction of the future. I think that's pretty nice.
That sounds like a very nice setup. So if I understand it correctly, if you are a member, then you can suggest the future directions and things like that, and then people can vote for in these, let's say, AGMs, if that's the word for it in Germany. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay. Yeah, no, very good. But so okay. I mean, I don't know if the your membership, is that something that people sign up for a year, or is that a fixed fee? Is that completely voluntary? I'm just thinking sort of ahead is, okay, you're a non-for-profit organization and you're not looking to make lots of money, but obviously you need to be able to sustain the whole operation, right? So with that model, do you think that's sustainable going forwards?
I mean, yeah. It was very hard to get there, I would say, because if you get an initial amount of funding, it's of course easy because you can start hiring someone. And I mean, if you start with 50 euros, you can barely afford the servers. And I mean, the founding members had to pay the first membership fee in order to get the project rolling. Right. But I mean, the path to this, as with basically every open source project, is of course to some degree with self-exploitation, unfortunately. But I think nowadays we're pretty much sustainable, and we have a lot of funding, and it's pretty nice because we can stay true to our ideals, because we are not dependent of single individuals. I mean, the largest membership fee that we get from a corporation is, as far as I know, 2,500 euros a year. And compared to the overall number, that's really just a small portion. And I'm
sure that's less than a GitHub Enterprise.
yeah, basically. And the funding basically is distributed among more than 1,000 members. So even if some drop out and decide to no longer support the foundation because they disagree with whatever, or because they are unhappy that we stand up against right-wing forces, there's still a lot of members who can compensate for this. And Yeah, if you sign up for Codeberg, you have like a minimum yearly membership fee of 24 euros. You can ask for a discount if you're a student or in a difficult financial situation where you can reduce this to 12 euros. And as corporate entities, you have to pay at least 100 euros. And after you signed up, the membership is permanent. You can cancel it at any time, but of course, we have a lot of people who have been member from day one and are still supporting the association. And overall, the numbers are growing steadily. And this year, we have really received a big hype of registrations after FOSDEM and after we took a clear stance against fascism and again, with some other Give Up GitHub news now in August. And we've really breaking records in new membership registrations this year.
Okay, so how does that kind of, in terms of growth, what does that look like in terms of membership?
Currently we are at 1,100 members. And I'm looking at a fancy graph right now, but it's hard to translate this into an audio recording. But for example, in February, we had 127 registrations, 60 in the month after that. And in August, we had the all-time record of 129 registrations. And it really means that we have gained like 30 or 40% new members this year, and the year isn't even over. So we might even double our numbers. Let's see. It also depends on how many people sign up for Codeberg in the days after Christmas, I suppose. And one aspect that is very important to mention is that membership in Codeberg EV is completely voluntary. So an account on Codeberg can be used without paying anything. It's completely open to everyone. And it's entirely optional to say, okay, I want to have my say in the direction of Codeberg. I want to support the project. Then you can join Codeberg EV as an association, but it doesn't bring you any other rewards than the ideological and philosophical advantage that you are under the control of the project.
I mean, that's a very interesting angle, because what is really interesting, let's put it this way, is your approach to that with regards to, if you're a large enterprise, you have the same rights as everybody else. Now, I'm just thinking about the kind of bigger terms, and let me paint the big picture here. Quite a few bodies in Germany and in Europe are actually developing software. And with regards to the public sector, a lot of movement is going on there, because I clearly see the shift in the public sector moving away from enterprise deployments. Nextcloud probably is the best example. If you take a look at the Nextcloud numbers, Frank Hartacek is doing an excellent job with regards to positioning the code base as an offering for the public sector, especially when it comes down to non-cloud deployments, in terms of you can host this in your basement and feel free to use it if you're a public sector entity, and off you go. So more and more money, and I'm talking about public money now, is being poured into open source, as in FLOSS development, whether it's actually within the public sector or the public sector spending on projects. Zendis and other German entities being the best example. Zendis, for the people who do not know, is essentially an initiative of the German government to fund dedicated, let's put it this way, I'm simplifying things, of course, to fund dedicated open source projects to kind of increase the independence of large American corporations, Microsoft probably being the best example, desktops, server environments, and all the rest of them. So more and more, let's put it this way, euros are being poured into that sort of thing. So I reckon you must see this engagement already on the horizon with regards to the increasing interest coming from the public sector in terms of an independent platform that is exactly not tied to GitLab, GitHub, and all the rest of them when it comes down to code hosting services. Let's put it this way.
I mean, As far as I know, we haven't so far been in touch with the public sector in detail. I mean, Michael will surely add to that. I think part of the reason is that we've been slightly too late because in Germany, at least, we have a code hosting platform from the government, which is based on GitLab. So it's called Open Code, which is, of course, a good thing because I mean, I think when Open Code launched, we haven't been there yet. We missed some features, and I can understand that they chose GitLab over Git or for JO. If they even had a tender for that, I don't even know. Maybe even not. But I think nowadays there is a lot of potential. But at the moment, we see most interest from companies actually, because I mean they have their trade secrets. They have important code that they put into big cloud platforms, and cloud platforms charge a lot. And especially with the rise of AI tools, where the costs of these tools are usually now integrated into the regular service fees. Also, AI tools are very expensive to run and very expensive to build. And I feel like a lot of companies do no longer want to pay up to 100 euros per user per month for code hosting, depending on the feature set, and self-hosting for JO and hiring, having one of your employees or like a few of them to maintain the service, or paying like the same amount that some services charge per user is the fee that some other services charge for JO hosting, for instance, where you get your full instance with as many users as you want to have. So I feel like we currently see most interest from companies, actually.
Yeah, I also see that significant increase of interest from the officials in Germany. But let me say that's growth on a very, very low level. If you compare what the government is paying to, let's say, Microsoft for desktop services or desktop licenses, and compare these numbers to the invest into open source, then I would wonder if this is more than 10%. So paying for licenses is like throwing money away, and paying for open source is doing an invest. So for every business people, it's quite clear what can be better for the future, but no one. So the change of mind is not arrived really in the broad, I would say.
I also think that one thing that we need to work on is the awareness of having an ecosystem around a free software project being better than a company. Because especially now that we have some kind of direct competition between Git and 4JO, Git also having enterprise offerings, and 4JO being completely library. There's no 4JO enterprise version. There's no special thing. But a lot of companies have been looking at Git simply because there's one company behind that they contract. They say, oh, I appreciate that we can get support for it. The thing about 4JO is you aren't tied to one company. There is actually a section of service providers for 4JO that we even link from our homepage. And I think people need to understand that this is actually an advantage, that there is not the service provider behind a product, but there is like the choice between multiple. And if you are unhappy with one provider, you can still keep 4JO, but move from company A to company B, maybe to MISA if you want, or away from MISA, whatever. You have the freedom to move without onboarding your users into a new software product. And I think this is a strength that we need to communicate better, because the natural thing is to just get a license, get support, and be done with it without considering the ecosystem around the software. But I mean, 4JO does pretty great. We even have a long-term support version that is completely free and libre. And I believe that most software projects would turn this into a paid enterprise-only offering, while we do not.
It's a very interesting perspective, because you hit the nail on the head there, I reckon, because at the end of the day, free, libre, and open source software is all about choice. And if you take a look at the history of free, libre, open source software, if you're not happy with one approach, simply change it. That would be my perspective on things.
And I think there's even one more aspect on this story. So I think last month I discussed with some public employee. I discussed and the question was, is Europe able to be digital sovereign? And what we'll discuss in terms of development capacity, and do we have this development capacity in Europe at all? And if you think about this question and think about how open source works, then it's quite easy to answer. So it's not a question whether we have this capacity in Europe. The only question is, have we enough capacity to integrate the existing software and to improve the existing software and make this usable to the governments and to the companies in Europe? So that's a huge benefit from be founded on open source. So we have the worldwide capacity to develop things, and the development works already, and the products are good enough already, or nearly good enough.
I mean, that's a call for Brussels to decide, because at the end of the day, free, libre, open source software is all about independence, right? So if you don't want to tie yourself to an entity, whether it's Chinese, whether it's American, doesn't matter. Your only choice is actually to go down that route for sovereignty, in terms of you want to stay independent. And if you have a code base where millions of people potentially can contribute to, that's your plan A, for want of a better expression.
Well, you could also argue that the governments don't really do anything in terms of funding any of these projects, right? It's they're happy to, as mentioned, they're happy to pay Microsoft, but like Codeberg is relying on members and stuff like that, and could easily be some. I don't think any European governments have specific funds for any open source project, right?
They
have
do.
some policies, but
no, they do. I mean,
they do. Do tell.
If you just take a look at the situation in Germany, quite a few federal states, and Schleswig-Holstein probably being the best example, are moving away.
Yes, they're moving, but they're not actually, let's say, contributing to Nextcloud, right, or people like that. It's from a from a pure funding point of view, they could easily contribute some money to many open source projects that. Specifically, if they're going to use them as well, then.
I mean, this is the reason why the federal government implemented these policies with regards to Zendis and some other projects that specifically pour public funding, as in public money, into these projects.
Yeah.
And to be honest, in Germany, we have the Sovereign Tech Agency, and this Sovereign Tech Agency is supporting the very important projects. So let's say Log4j shell attack was the turning point, and so that they decided that these very important building bricks for open source software should be funded, and that's one of the funding sources we discussed with also. So there is funding, but if you compare the numbers, I think there can be more funding.
I mean, it would be a great future if the government would fund more. But on the other hand, I started to consider how Codeberg might have been different if there was government funding from day one. And I feel like governmental funding is also always a risk, because it's still a dependence, in this case, on the governance of the government, basically. And I mean, I know a lot of nice projects basically
I mean,
disappeared because government just cut funding and cancels the project.
Yeah, no, I understand the dependency part, but it's more of a, why are they a member of your project, for example, right? Probably the answer is.
But I mean, it would be really great, like if there was, like now that Codeberg has managed to raise a diversity of income sources, it would be just nice to have like some more money from the government, for example, or like even better support. I mean, the government don't just need to pour money into every project. They could also hire developers in order to build their platforms, and they could contribute back to free and library software. Some already do, but I'm pretty sure this could be expanded.
My understanding is actually that the Sovereign Technology Fund exactly does that. They support open source projects in terms of they fund whatever is out there which they consider worth funding. Although this is the time span is limited, but hey, you talk about the federal government of Germany here. But as far as I know, basically that's their kind of aim in terms of if you have a code base, you can apply for funding there, and you will get a little bit of moolah.
Yeah, basically. I mean, ForJeo as a project always has some contacts. I mean, we're in touch with the Sovereign Tech Agency. We have received funding from NLnet in the past. I think NLnet is also important mentioning because they distribute funding in huge part from the European Union to projects around the world. And they allowed to do things that we wouldn't have been capable of doing otherwise. But in the end, like if you compare the amount of funding that has been received by ForJeo to the amount of human work that individuals donated into the software, the balance is pretty clear. And most of the work that is happening has been donations from individuals who donate their free time into the project, of course. And I've also been doing that for years now with up to 20 or 30 hours per week of voluntary work without receiving compensation. And if you would turn this into amount of like funding for jobs, it would also be a rather huge number, I suppose.
And you're not even living in Nebraska. That was a joke. Anyway. Okay, there are two questions that I still have on my mind before we wrap this up. If I take a look at Codeberg, the website, I see quite a few repositories with various very interesting code bases like continuous integration, like aesthetic, website generator, and all the rest of them. Much of the code base seems to be in Go. Like ForJeo, actually, because ForJeo, if I recall correctly, is all but written in Go. Any particular reason for that technology of choice, I wonder?
Actually not. I mean, as I mentioned, the origin of ForJeo from Gitlab, from Gox, which was like a Go Git service. It's just the code base that we inherited, basically. And a lot of people who have contributed in Go have decided to just stick to it because, I mean, it's much easier to agree on a language that most of the contributors already know by force, because it's much easier to say, okay, let's use that. I mean, if you start thinking about other programming languages, there will be more opinions and developers that you have, basically. And but actually, the ecosystem is not only Go. I know that a lot of people are actually also using Rust, and yeah.
Martin, do pay attention there. The last question, or the second question, I did.
I like the more opinions than developers. That's a very
okay.
very good
What's ahead in terms of what's next on the horizon with regards to ForJeo? Never mind Codeberg. If you can talk about the roadmap at all.
Sure. I mean, at ForJeo, there's like we cracked the 1,000 issues record now, so there's definitely a lot in the pipeline. And at ForJeo, we're currently focusing on improving not only federation but also the general Git workflow, because one downside of GitHub is that contributing to a free software project where you don't have permission to contribute to is quite a kind of cumbersome. I mean, you have to fork the project. Then you have to edit a file. Then you have to push it back to your fork, create a pull request. if something changed upstream, you need to manage multiple Git remotes. I mean, GitHub added like some convenience buttons to simplify the workflow, but for JO, you can actually just git clone a project, do a change, and push it back with a magic command, which is called a git workflow, which is a special workflow that is similar to Gerrit, where you just push back a change and you create a pull request without all the need to hassle with a fork and multiple git remotes and synchronizing the fork, etc. That is all vanishing. But we want to make this more accessible. And at Codeberg, we are currently working on improving our pages server, because we know that static website hosting is very important to many people. And our current pages server is unfortunately a little bit unreliable due to various reasons. And we need to make this better. And yeah, there are currently two competing approaches, basically. And we're currently defining a migration path from one to the other. Hoping for a more reliable service. And yeah, we're also currently working on reliability of our infrastructure. So we have currently, Codeberg is basically hosted on 3 physical servers that we own, that are hosted in a data center in Berlin. And but not all the services make use of the 3 nodes yet. So we have distributed Ceph cluster, we have a 3-node database with Galera, which is like a MariaDB server. We have distributed Redect, which is like a Redis fork. But for JO itself is not yet distributed, and we will be working on that. And last but not least, expanding CI/CD capacity is also high on the roadmap. This year, I introduced hosted for JO Actions. For JO Actions, it's pretty easy to self-host. You just grab the runner, install it somewhere, and it can run your CI builds in Docker containers. But a lot of people don't want to spin up a CI node just for their small CI runs. And at Codeberg, we believe that you should not need to. So we're expanding hosted CI/CD capacity so you can just have your CI pipelines running out of the box.
So this is comparable to GitHub Actions?
Yes, for JO Actions is pretty similar to GitHub Actions. It's not a drop-in replacement. There are some small differences that you need to be aware of, simply because GitHub Actions is really tied to how GitHub works. But for many projects, it's quite easy to adapt your GitHub workflows, and you actually can reuse the GitHub Actions workflows. So like the Git checkout action and the pull request and whatever, like a lot of things from the GitHub ecosystem just work out of the box or with small changes.
I didn't hear anything about a Codeberg Copilot. Is there no plans for this?
Currently, there are no plans for AI integration, not only because we don't want to fuck off our users, but actually there are some people who are working or playing with that, but I don't know if anything has worked out. And actually, I'm very surprised that we don't receive requests for AI hosting more often. I mean, I kind of expected that there would be like once a month at least someone ordering some AI integration for JO, but so far I'm not aware of anyone who tried.
But Martin, you see this AI fad will die down soon. It's just a matter of weeks, I suppose, before it's cloud all over again and some other fads that will disappear within a fortnight. Rest assured.
It depends which fortnight, but yeah.
So no need to think about Copilot and friends, I suppose. Anyway, okay, if there isn't anything that we haven't touched upon,
any call to actions, maybe?
Exactly, any call to actions, or we do know that some drug cartel bosses are listening to this podcast, so if you look for additional funding, now's the time.
Yeah, actually, there's one thing I want to mention that I'm very proud of, and I mentioned this briefly at the beginning of the episode. I'm very happy that the Codeberg Presidium, which is like the elected gremium and of all Codeberg members, and the Codeberg Executive Board, which is like the people that actually run the day-to-day administrative matters, have become more diverse, because initially, until this summer, most of the people steering the matters of Codeberg have been the founding members, but some of the founding members have become inactive over the years. And this year marks the first time that we onboarded a lot of new contributors from the Codeberg ecosystem into elected positions. And currently we're 8 people, and not all from Germany for the first time, that steer the matters of Codeberg EV. And I think this is an important milestone for a project to be really better distributed and not. I mean, for us, it's sometimes more difficult because we can't just speak German in our meetings, but I feel like it's very valuable to the project overall.
Okay, Michael, anything from your side before we close this off?
I have nothing to add at this time, I think.
Excellent. In that case, it's now time for the boxes, as in the picks of the week. I need to say guests go first. So, Otto, what's your box?
Yeah, actually, my pick of the week is CoMaps, which is a somewhat recent fork of organic maps. And I've been using it to navigate on my phone for years. I mean, organic maps. In a sense, I feel like the CoMaps, organic maps drama reminds me of what we have been through with Gitty and ForJail. And I'm pretty happy that CoMaps exists and develops the project in a community-controlled direction. And yeah, I've just filed my first bug report to CoMaps a few days ago, and I'm hoping for it to be resolved soon. But otherwise, it's working pretty great.
Okay. So, I mean, I came across organic maps all those years ago when I was looking for an alternative to OS Mand as an OpenStreetMap for Android, all those moons ago. Organic maps does run on both iOS and Android devices. What about the project that you mentioned, also multi-platform?
Yes, I mean, I'm an Android user only, but it has an iOS build available in the App Store. And,
okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it has a desktop version, but it runs fine on Android, and it's available in F-Droid and Easy on Droid for those.
All the better. Michael, over to you. What's your pick? What's your box?
Yeah, I've seen a small story about smart devices, and I think that's a great example. So I think during the last week, the Bose sound touch devices, they decided to cut off the cloud APIs there, and all the users of these sound devices, smart sound devices, now have their device still at home, but the function is quite limited. So they told that Bluetooth will still be alive, but how to connect to end for this, like this? Oh, just a business decision. There's no reason announced.
Okay.
But somehow
nice.
the business thought it makes no further sense.
Don't buy a Bose, yeah, okay.
Yeah. And there are many upset people, and one more time, there's some basic truth in this story.
Can't blame them, actually.
Yeah. So Zimmerman, your picked box.
I thought you were going first. Anyway, my box is actually, and then it's your turn, Martin. It's a plant actually by the name of love bush.
Okay.
Not to be confused with other love bush, of course.
Some kind of flammable substance that
No. No. It's also known as cathedral bells, air plant, live plant, miracle leaf. But I've started growing this recently, and the Latin name is Canalocoi pinnata. Essentially, it's a succulent with regards to, it comes from Madagascar, but it grows quite nicely. And one of the interesting properties is actually of this plant, it develops little plants on the edges of the leaves, which is quite interesting. Because there are not that many plants that do that sort of thing.
Okay. And
over to you, Martin.
Any other benefits to this plant?
I haven't quite discovered them yet, but maybe there are some hidden properties that I've yet to come across.
Not requiring much water.
Well, it's a succulent, so it's pretty kind of moderate with regards to water consumption. It doesn't speak. It doesn't talk. It doesn't talk back. Even more important. It's quite. Let's put it this way. tame with regards to the things it does require. And it's quite nice to look at, actually, especially in the mornings when it does have some shine when the first sunbeams touch it.
Ah, you have sun. Excellent. Okay.
Yes, in contrast to the UK, we do have sun, Martin. Yes, we do.
Yeah.
It's a common occurrence in Europe mainland, yes.
You read it every week, don't you? Yeah, okay.
More or less like every day almost. But this is not about the weather, but this is
Indeed.
what Martin's POX. So, Martin, why don't you go ahead?
My POX is a book called The Particle at the End of the Universe, which is kind of describing the whole discovery of the Higgs boson, really. It's a great read if you're...
What's a boson, Martin? You should probably explain this.
How many hours have you got? Yeah.
No.
It's just a very small particle, yeah.
So, for those two people in the audience who are not familiar with particle physics...
Yeah, this is not an episode about particle physics.
Exactly. If you have an atom, if you cut down this atom into separate parts, you arrive at neutrons, protons, electrons, all the rest of it. If you cut down these parts further, eventually you arrive at very tiny things.
Indeed.
And the boson would be one of them.
Yeah, it was quite difficult to discover these things. Yeah.
Yes, because they're very small.
Indeed. Yes. Need some pretty good glasses.
Forget about the glasses, people. Don't worry about it. Links, of course, maybe in the show notes. And with that, we would like to thank our guests, Michael and Otto. It has been more than
thank you very much,
interesting. Thank you very much for being there.
And thank you for the invite.
Our pleasure. And hope to have you back in about 2 months' time when you actually have conquered the world.
We'll make sure to hurry up.
Please do. This is the Linux in-laws.
You come for the knowledge,
but stay for the madness.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you like this feature presentation. If so, please spread the word. If not, please let us know. Feedback at linuxinlaws.eu.